Hello everyone, my name is TheMadScorpyon and welcome to the Stasis portion of my Prismatic element guides. In this video you can expect to see the aspects, abilities, as well as all the perks you can expect to see in Prismatic come final shape, as well as some of the exotics that I can recommend for your Stasis elements while dealing with all of the other ones at the same time. Now, let me just say before we get into it, I am still, of course, sick. I think it actually got worse from the last video I did. So if I sound rough or nasally, I cannot breathe through the top half of my face. So just bear with me as I deal with this sickness. Starting off with the hunters, as usual, I'm just going to go over some of the subclass verbs you can expect to see with Stasis. Of course, it does run in slow and freeze. That is the main aspect of it. First slow being the target has slowed movement and ability regeneration. Their weapon performance is reduced. Slowed combatants have difficulty firing accurately. As well, overload champions are stunned. After accumulating enough slow stacks, 100 like Scorch, the target is officially frozen. When they are frozen, the target is trapped in stasis matter and is unable to move. They also take additional damage while frozen, and the target then shatters, which think of shatter like stasis ignition. I'm not sure if there is another detail somewhere else that I can use, but I suppose here. Then we have stasis crystals, which is a creation of stasis. They can be a crystal of solidified stasis matter. Upon creation, it freezes anything nearby and also slows nearby players. Crystals can be destroyed, dealing damage in an area. Think of a small pocket grenade, with every crystal being able to shatter. Now, right here is the actual definition for shatter. When a frozen target is shattered, they take damage and deal damage to nearby targets. Shatter damage, of course, can stun unstoppable champions. And next to it as well, there is the Stasis Shard, a small shard of stasis matter that can be collected to restore melee energy. Now, I will warn you all, there is an additional one that I just learned today will be coming, and that is Frost Armor. A lot of it will revolve around Stasis Shards, in addition to Frost Armor being a healing and damage reduction buff for Stasis. Now, it doesn't heal naturally, I don't believe, thinking off the top of my head. It is mainly damage reduction, but there is fragments and aspects you can add to it that will improve the benefits as well as healing, and at the same time, it is just going to work functionally through Stasis Shards, if I recall the details from the top of my head. So, look forward to some additional ease of use for Stasis in endgame. Of course, moving into the abilities, starting off, Silence and Squall, which was a giveaway considering it is the only Stasis super that it has access to. You summon two Stasis commas, Silence and Squall. The first one will flash freeze anything and do some damage, while the Squall causes a Stasis storm that slows and damages targets caught inside, meanwhile shattering anything that freezes. Now, this is a solid enough super. It is straight up fire and forget for some quick ad control. For your class abilities, you will have access to all of them, including the Acrobat's Dodge. For the melee, you will have the only one available, which is the Withering Blade, which is basically small little stasis blades that you can chuck at things to slow. However, it does not freeze outright if you hit them with all of it. And then for the next bit, you do have the Dust Field Grenade, which is a field of slow that can steadily freeze over time. It does not do a lot of damage, though. It is mostly just slowing and freezing to lock down enemies. And as well, there is the Winter's Shroud aspect available, which is basically dodging will slow anything nearby. To be buffed as well with Frost Armor once that update comes out. From that point, that is all of Stasis Hunter in their abilities. Now, of course, exotics are a little bit limited in terms of general. I do believe they have access to one of the most well-known ones in the form of, let's see, I forget its name. Renewal Grasp, which of course is a Dust Field buff, which just makes it so you take less damage in Dust Field area. Of course, a real easy guest for the endgame, in addition to Frost Armor. Plus, from there is of course Mask of Bacchus, which does give you the shift instead of dodge, a small teleport, and an arc weapons buff instead of, as I think it also deals stasis weapons buffs, in case you want to spec out a little bit. But from that point, off the top of my head, I actually can't think of anything else that is stasis specific that I can recommend for the hunters. However, of course, there is always the usual. Star Eater Scales is a favorite when it comes to Silence and Squall. Of course, Frosties if you want to stick with ice for your idea. And the 6 Coyote if you want to double up on slowing dodges. But again, from that point, there isn't many other things I can recommend aside from Foe Tracer and Assassin's Cowl, the usual neutral game exotics that are just plain outright good for any class. And then to our avalanche-wielding Titans, of course, we have the only super available in the Stasis subclass for Titans, and that is Glacial Quake, where you summon a Stasis Gauntlet and become a roaming super. It's heavy slam, creating lots of Stasis crystals on the field, and its melee basically being an upgraded version of its basic melee that will shatter through anything in your path. Solid ad clear, but not very good for damage unless you can focus it all into a bubble, which is a very niche skill. From that point as well, there is the basic melee, the Shiver Strike, which is a quick charge, shoulder charge that you don't need to sprint to activate, that lunges forward and slows anything you hit. Solid uppercut. As well for the grenade, it is the Glacier Grenade, which at any point will summon a wall of stasis crystals that can either block damage like a small barricade or otherwise freeze anything in its path for you to slow on command. And for the aspect you can expect to be available, it is the Diamond Lance, which is a quite nifty one. You can shatter or defeat targets with stasis abilities or weapons to create a stasis lance. You can, of course, throw them to freeze anything on impact, or otherwise slam them to create a freezing impact in a small area. These are also getting a buff in the future, so expect this to be a bit more potent. Not to mention the ease of use, considering you just literally need a stasis weapon, and you can summon Diamond Lances at any point. Now, unlike the last two elements that I went over, it definitely seems like Stasis has some things going for them, as all of the ones I can think of for every class are still applicable to Stasis. Of course, there isn't many options, so it's not surprising. But of course, one of the main things I would always recommend is Hoarfrost Z, which basically replaces your barricade with a instant Glacier Grenade, as well as buffs when near said crystals. In terms of Stasis and just making ability energy, it is almost a non-variable, just because it can summon crystals at any point, and your barricade is one of the fastest recharging things that Titans have access to. As well, there is the one that I forget the name of every time, Cadmus Ridge Lance Camp. As I had just mentioned, Diamond Lance is getting a buff, and it is definitely going to come with some more power, and this increases the ease of use for Diamond Lances themselves, because obviously Diamond Lances create stasis impacts, or stasis crystals on impact when they are thrown, with more crystals created by hitting larger targets. While using a stasis club class and behind a rally barricade specifically, any precision hits in a rapid fashion and combatant final blows can summon a Diamond Lance when using a stasis weapon, which if you build into it, just literally makes instant freeze damage options. And once again, it is getting buffed, so it should have some more power to every Diamond Lance. And then I would also recommend something like Precious Scars. Going forward with the Frost Armor buff that's going to be coming with damage reduction, the ease of earning restoration just by using stasis weaponry with Precious Scars, and of course the aforementioned just healing on general revives and everything else is always a solid option for anything endgame. From that point though, I would just mainly recommend the usual aspects. I maybe say Worm Gods if you want to go full melee Shiver Strike. Syntheseps is always an option because you will be thick in the field using your Glacial Quake, and Icefall Mantle is an option. It didn't seem to be specific for Stasis, aside from the fact that they grant a bonus to Stasis weapon damage at the same time, but I would honestly say it's between this one and Lance Cap if you want to spec out for Stasis. And it may seem like this will get reworked, considering with the Frost Armor it may apply an enhanced version of Frost Armor, but we don't have any official news on whether or not this is getting reworked just yet. From that point though, again, it would be the usual stuff. I might recommend anything else that was the usual thing. I don't think Peregrine Greaves works with Shiver Strike, so I can't say that for a shoulder charge. And of course, Armentarium, if you just want to have an additional Glacier Grenade in your back pocket. And the usual Heart of Inmost Light if you just want ability energy on everything. And of course, the Severance Enclosure, in case you feel nifty enough to trigger a melee build with your Shiver Strike or something else you have access to. And with our Icy Warlock dress wearers, we of course have the few options available to any Shadebinder. Its usual Winter's Wrath, which is summoning a Stasis Staff that can hurl out freezing projectiles, and I also have a Shockwave that can shatter anything frozen, not just from your basic attack, but anything that can freeze. Of course, it does have its only single melee, the Penumbral Blast, which will freeze anything on command if it is not defeated, and Cold Snap Grenades, a seeker that spawns from your grenade impact that will freeze anything in its path and chain between multiple enemies. Very nifty for just shutting down a field if you need a moment to breathe. From there, it is probably the most useful of the Shade Binder aspects in the form of the Bleak Watcher, which you convert your grenade after holding and converting into a stasis turret that steadily and on its own freezes the field with slow-in projectiles that can fully freeze. From this point as well, that is pretty much everything it has access to, which I can actually straight go into this because the few available stasis exotics that is of course on Warlock are still again going to be usable, and some are actually going to be buffed come here soon. There is of course Osmiomancy Gloves, which turns Bleak Watchers into an OP setup, giving you double grenade charges for cold snaps and also improving the grenade recharge that you can earn from just throwing cold snap grenades. It is of course the easy method of throwing out a turret and then throwing out a cold snap to freeze a field and get lots of regen on your grenade. High tier option for any stasis subclass. From that point as well, there is Ballador's Wrathweavers, which is very stasis in its ideas, with right now just making it so your Shockwave does more damage in your super, as well anyone inside the Frost Pulse or the Winter's Wrath will gain Overshield and increase damage with stasis weapons. However, it is actually getting a buff in the coming season with a slight rework that has to do with the upcoming Frost Armor update, so keep in mind of this when trying to make endgame survivability for your Warlocks. But at that same point, though, I again don't have anything else that I can exactly recommend because we don't have any things that apply to just stasis. It is the usual neutral game crowd that I would always recommend. I have Another World for basic recharge, Verity's Brow specifically for grenade recharge, although I would definitely recommend Osmiomancies over this. The Stag if you're looking for some additional wells. Clawzaw Hamkara for the Crucible crowd looking to just make double Penumbral Blast freezes. But from there isn't much else off the top of my head that I can actually think, aside from maybe Boots the Assembler, for just more heals if you're looking to be a bit more of a support guy. And same thing with Mantle Battle Harmony if you want to stasis out and just get more super energy. But from that point, that is everything I actually have for you on the field of stasis. That it's a bit limited. Thankfully, I caught the update about Frost Armor now, as it would have been a little bit weird if I made the video before and made a guide to stasis that had just announced a rework. But with that, my name is TheMadScorpyon. I will see you in the next video.